In this video, we're going to look at a variant of the Heretic Legion, the Naval Raiding Party, building a 700 Ducat beginning of campaign list, trying a new presentation style that hopefully will save me some editing work down the line. Following up my previous videos where I laid out a warband for each faction based on the model selection provided in the Kickstarter, we're going to go a bit more freeform here and discuss the warband variants available as of writing to the various factions. There's a huge variance between factions regarding whether or not these variants are playable, using the models provided in the default Kickstarter warbands, where the Heretic Legion and Black Rail are arguably already completely configured for it, while the Iron Sultan and New Antioch pretty much require picking up other models to make them reasonable to run depending on the variant. In this series of videos, I'll be going over the various variants for the factions, discussing unique elements of said warband, equipments, units, etc., how this changes your strategy, and then provide an example list similar to the previous videos. I want to preface with a couple things though. First off, if you're looking at the variants, I assume you already know how to play the base faction, and so will not be rehashing everything I said in my previous videos about them, only talking about the differences the variant provide in order to save some time. So check out those early videos if need be. Second is that these lists aren't going to be as optimized as the standard list from a pure number standpoint, sacrificing some elements of efficiency for the sake of playing into the variant's flavor. They'll still have some rationale behind them, but there's plenty of areas where I'll say grab one more of the unique unit or item over something that's marginally better. I figure this is fine since you're playing these variants, you're likely more attracted to the flavor and trying to make use of the unique mechanics available. For this vid, we're focusing on the variant for Heretic Legion, and one of the more simple yet effective variants compared to what we've looked at previously in terms of departure from the faction standard. The standard Heretic Legion is a solid all-arounder, with some reliably clunky yet powerful armory options excluding one or two items, and with very powerful built-in units such as the Artillery Witch and Werewolf. The Naval Raiding Party is one that invokes a lot of cool imagery, but mechanically is quite restricted. In general, this variant matches its flavor quite well, shutting off much of the faction's heavier ranged firepower in lieu of constructing a team of infiltrating commandos that can outmaneuver the opposition the majority of the time. For this list, we're going to look at two units I haven't discussed yet in my videos: the Artillery Witch and Heretic Chorister. We won't look at the Werewolf in depth, besides an acknowledgement of its significant loss as part of the variant restrictions, as many consider it to be one of the best all-in-one units, but let's first start off with the variant's flavor and mechanics. Right off the bat, we have Fast as Lightning, which makes all models in this warband have +1 to dash actions, which is a fairly huge boon as it means that every one of your guys are going to be more consistently able to cover more distance per turn than your opponent. Going from 58% to 80% success on the most common risky action in the game is obviously very valuable, and when playtesting you can really feel that speed on certain scenarios. If the scenario involves getting to a place first as the primary qualification, this variant provides a significant advantage, as not only can you get to the objectives first, but you can even start retreating from them by the time your opponent gets to them. The fact that this applies to all of your models and not just expected model archetypes such as dependent nuns means you're able to get your far stronger or numerous units into the fight to contest against the one or two objective rushers the opponent may have. For this reason, you do want a lot of guys to most capitalize on this ability, and the restrictions put on this warband will emphasize this. We can also make good use of shorter range firearms since we're simply able to get closer more often, so things like flamers and shotguns are more enticing than usual, while longer range firearm wielding units can much more reliably shoot and scoot to stay alive. The next is Close Assault Weapons, which allows us the purchase of submachine guns for ducats rather than glory, and for cheaper than Antioch can. These are essential to this warband's long-term strategy, as you don't have too much big hitting range firepower available, but a hail of bullets will eventually put down even the staunchest targets, or at least soften them up for the more dangerous soldiers. Even more annoyingly, you can use one of the theoretical 2 blood markers produced to make chasing your retreating unit even more difficult. Again, you'll want to play this variant very guerrilla fighter-esque, utilizing your mobility to the annoyance of your enemy. Next are a series of restrictions, with light troops limiting us to only 1 anointed and 1 artillery witch, and Let Sleeping Dogs Lie limits us to not having any werewolf. This is a huge hit to the faction options for dealing with heavier units, and so will warp the entirety of our playstyle, especially if you plan on playing a full campaign. Having only 1 anointed means that the entire slew of heavy weapons available to the faction become much more inaccessible and clunky to use. 1 witch doesn't hurt too hard since we can only take 1 anyways for at least a couple games and caps at 2 normally. The Werewolf is a loss of the faction's best option for a rushdown and tearing through elites with its inherent armor pen while being tanky itself. Fortunately though, things like the Chorister and Priest getting dash bonuses lets them fill said role well enough. This makes things like incorrect shrines and machine armor require significantly more thought to deal with, including the heretical strategy of simply running away from said units to focus on more winnable fights, as you can reposition around the map more quickly than your pursuers in most cases. Lastly is Unseen Advance, which is the ability to upgrade 3 non-elite units for 10 ducats with the Infiltrator keyword. Great for turning the usual lone commando into an actually devastating kill team, theoretically deploying 4 units as infiltrators, with one being an anointed can be absolutely devastating for both map control and forced early engagement. This, of course, is with the absolutely huge caveat that always comes up with Infiltrator, that in about half your games the feature will quite literally be useless wasted ducats, so while great in flavor, I advise against going all in on this for at the 700 ducat level, and saving them for upgrades later on, as it's a great thing when it does go off, but otherwise it's just a pit of disappointment for its price point. But will become proportionally less of your budget wasted down the line, and that's it for unique elements, so let's get on to the units. We'll start with the Artillery Witch, arguably the face of the faction or even the game. This unit is mostly a complete one with relatively limited viable equipment options. Stat line is nothing impressive with standard movement, neutral ranged rolls, and disadvantage on melee attacks. But this is less of a problem than one would inherently expect due to its built-in weaponry. The Infernal Bomb is its one-handed range attack that has a massive range of 36 inches, ignores long range and cover. This means that you're pretty much always rolling flat for attacks, which is fine, but still not great until you factor in the blast 3-inch effect and the near miss mechanic. The near miss mechanic is where your opponent gets to move the bomb 1 inch off target for each degree of failure. So with blast 3, this means a unit in open field is still going to get hit even if you roll at a 4, which is about 91% odds. Of course, this glancing blow doesn't hurt as much, and depending on terrain can actually completely put the bomb into a harmless or safer area, but still makes the neutral attack roll less painful. The other most important feature of this unit is that if you actually do directly hit the target, you get a roll 3d6 for injury. So this unit will very reliably kill even reinforced armor units 50% of the time, and machine armor or level 3 armor units about 37% of the time, with this rocketing up to 61% and above once you get blood markers into play. Reliably one of the hardest hitting units in the faction, but with some serious considerations. Quickly, the other 2 traits of this unit are that it can levitate, meaning that it can freely climb and takes no fall damage, and then has a built-in gas mask in the form of artificial life. The important consideration is that this unit is extremely vulnerable to blood markers, as with a neutral base stat, even having 1 dice worth of penalty will drastically decrease your odds of landing a direct hit, and its bad melee stat means it's very achievable to have your opponent completely shut this unit down with a single suicidal shock trooper. So, carefully guard this unit as much as possible, ideally keeping at least 1 melee-capable unit around it to try to deter or remove closing threats. An anointed with a grenade launcher or a machine gun can act as a great bodyguard who can basically act as a secondary 36-inch attacker while still being a significant deterrence to melee assaults. The other unit I want to discuss here is the Heretic Chorister, a fairly straightforward melee powerhouse and AoE debuffer. Being an elite unit, he can wield the Sacrificial Blade, which with his +2 melee dice renders him an absolutely brutal threat. One can get him to -3 armor while wielding a trench shield, which can make him an absolute hassle to get rid of once we consider his abilities. First off, Fear is a nice survivability tool, making a majority of units have a debuff to fighting back in melee, but more importantly is Unholy Hymns, which gives a flat -1 dice to all actions enemies attempt within 8 inches. This is huge, as it means that most units flat out can't afford to attempt dashes or like medkits. They all become very dangerous to attempt, and general infantry find themselves rarely succeeding in their attacks. If not immune to fear, a yeoman trying to melee this chorister will have -2 dice, which is disastrous. And close range becomes shooting at long range, which again is quite a significant blow for any unit with a neutral stat line. Even units with +1 will feel the drop, as going from 80% to 58% will hurt. Affecting opposing units rather than being a self-protection means one can use them basically as a sort of shield for your advancing units, making melee counters or close-range fights swing significantly in your favor defensively. This can really hurt special abilities for elite units, as many of them are risky actions which will at least cause psychological hesitation on your opponent's side, and potentially cause them to perform a safer but less effective order of operations. Lastly, do not underestimate that many objective-based scenarios require an action performance to secure points, which can be absolutely devastating to fail. So now, onto the Warband construction, starting with the leader unit as usual. The Heretic Priest is going to be similar to how we equipped him previously, choosing a shield combo weapon in order to achieve the coveted -3 armor value, since the variant needs every durable unit it can get. But this time, with this variant, we can take the submachine gun. This gives us 2 very likely to hit attacks at range, and importantly, the assault property, which allows us to make use of the Sacrificial Blade efficiently. As discussed previously, the Sacrificial Blade is really great, with the risky feature being a very minor trade-off when equipped on units with good melee stats. The Gas Mask and Infernal Brandmark keeps this unit safe from the most popular bonus keywords that pierce their valuable -3 armor, but feel free to drop it in name for a helmet if you prefer. In general, since the Heretic Legion in this faction has cheap access to fire negation and reduction in fire dice, we'll take the Infernal Brand when possible. This unit can take and hold an entire objective on its own, and with the dash bonus, works as a fantastic frontline, with some great shenanigans one can engage with the Puppet Master ability, namely getting free attacks of opportunity or denying objectives that require units to be on them at the start or end of the round. Works great for killing things like Stigmatic Nuns that will usually be ahead of the base army, or of course fighting against the opposing leader unit. Moving forward, we're looking to actually drop the Sacrificial Knife for the Blasphemous Staff, as the bonuses from it will scale better and frees up the knife for the theoretical commando you'll eventually get. The Heretic Chorister is basically going to be the leader of your squad of infantry, putting up a terrifying frontline threat that he is supported by a hail of small arms fire. His hymns then providing debuffs towards anyone wishing to fight him or shoot past him at the squishier units. Very similar loadout to the Heretic Priest, but no ranged weapon as he has terrible stats for it, so better to spend that money elsewhere right now. With Trench Shield, we can get him easily up to a -3 armor value, and the Sacrificial Blade hits as hard as it does in the hands of the Priest. Fairly simple game plan here, get him into the fray as close to as many enemy units as possible to get the most out of his hymns. His aura is threatening enough that your opponent will likely intentionally maneuver around it, which you can then of course make use of if thinking far enough ahead, say with subsequent trooper activations. Infernal Brand and Gas Mask keeps us safe from those dastardly flamethrowers and gas weapons who seek to circumvent the Chorister's action penalty and armor. Nothing else much to say about him right now. The Artillery Witch is up next. With very little to say in terms of equipment, we just slap as much armor as possible onto her to keep her alive as long as possible, which at this price point is just a shield. You play her basically as a very scary sniper with want as wide as open sightlines as possible. It's very important to consider that her bombing ends her activation immediately, so you cannot shoot and scoot with her like all the other units in this warband. But she does still benefit from enhanced dashing, as it means that when combined with her ability to levitate, she can reach sniper positions really early or chase the favorable sightline more freely. Important to note though that you have to be able to see a point and able to target it with a bomb, meaning height, while not giving range bonus, is crucial for being able to target units hiding behind sandbags and the like. Combined with her great range, she's an absolute terror and most importantly your best ranged option for dealing with units like the Anchorite Shrine, as that 3d6 injury dice is crucial for felling them. As you ignore range and cover, you just need to be able to glimpse said gargantuan models for an unhindered attack. As mentioned earlier, extremely vulnerable unit, so definitely try to at least keep units out of melee with it. It is worth considering that you can give her Infiltrator in this warband, which, while not so important offensively due to her range, it is useful defensively as you can make sure she's safe round 1 after the majority of models have been placed, helping avoid the turn 1 sniper magnet that she is. And rarely any faction has more than 2 infiltrators. If you have another unit with Infiltrator, you can pretty consistently have her safe from opposing infiltrators, as flamethrower rushes of sniper units and the like are a popular strategy. Of course though, you're giving up a lot of offensive utility for this if you do this later down the line. Done with the unique units. Time to take a look at our foot soldiers. We've got a pair of twins. The Legionnaires are more interesting in this warband variant. With the ranged upgrade, we're able to give them both a submachine gun, a shield, and a bayonet. With this equipment, we can later get armor for both, giving them actually decent armor values. But offensively can actually be quite impactful by racking up a good number of blood markers while still being able to easily retreat with the follow-up dash. I usually have these two guys work with the Chorister to really lay into the frontline units. Usually won't be charging unless possible targets are locked into melee with the Chorister, but the bayonet is still sufficient to allow for melee and assault functionality. 2 Heretic Troopers also join our fray. Here, one acting as a Flamer Trench Mole, which can be used not only to deal with early armor targets, but also, importantly, force your opponent into positions that may leave them vulnerable to the Artillery Witch. With Enhanced Dash, you can use them to grab objectives much easier than you'd expect. The other just has gas grenades, as game 1 not many people have gas mask all around, so that armor pen may come in very useful and allowing good blood marker generation. The survivability is a bit better than your usual unequipped grunts, since they can reliably dash away after getting their shot off. Nothing much else to say about them besides getting them some more equipment eventually is nice, as the Warband variant will really be pushing the limits on numbers of these types of infantry as the campaign goes on, due to simply lacking the ability to buy more of other types of units. Upgrading the Gas Grenade Trooper into a Flamer Mole like the other is a good way to go. Objective dominance via action economy that can dash around the map is your endgame here. So in summary, this warband features 1 Heretic Priest at 188 ducats, an Artillery Witch at 100 ducats, a Heretic Chorister at 148, 2 Legionnaires at 77 each, 1 Heretic Trooper at 40, and the Heretic Trooper with Infiltrator and the Flamer coming in at 70, coming out to exactly 700 ducats. Upgrading for later games include focusing on getting the singular allowed anointed into the warband, since an infiltrating heavy weapon or anti-material rifle is very intimidating, and a Death Commando again for infiltrator purposes. Giving the Legionnaires armor and the polearm can also make them surprisingly sticky to deal with. So, let me know if there's a specific variant you'd like me to take a look at. Thanks for watching if you made it this far.